Welcome to the Grow Podcast. I'm Pastor Mike with New Hope Network. We're here to help you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus. I'm so glad you're with us today.
What's up, New Hope family? Welcome back to the Grow Podcast. My name is David. I'm very excited that you're here. It's episode 44. I'm here with Pastor Mike as always. Hello, Pastor Mike.
Hello, David.
This is your 44th episode. This is only my 40... How many have I not been here? Two? 42nd
42nd episode. Yeah.
So, and I think it's more important to focus on how many I've been here for. So welcome to episode 42 of the Grow.
Today we're talking about narcissism.
Oh, man. Wow. That parlayed so well.
So we're talking about a topic we don't want to talk about a lot.
So let's do more nonsense than normals to avoid talking about sin.
So we're right in the middle of this fun series.
Yeah, I love this series. And I think it's going to be a really cool one for New Hope in general. Jesus never said that, which you rejected my idea to just go through a list of things that I came up with that Jesus never said.
Yes,
just
I did.
Talk about them. That was my plan.
A lot of your brainstorms that don't make it past the door.
Most of my ideas here get rejected.
You've had some good ones.
That's why
and
I
you've
have
regretted
so many
those.
Yeah, that is also true. So I like to have great ideas that cause more work for others.
Yeah.
And
your great ones around here have
the
caused
last year
you
or
a lot of
so,
work.
they've really caused a lot more work for me. I don't know how that
David,
happened.
that's a great idea. Go do it.
Yes. After a pretty crazy Christmas season for Michael and I, we came to a pact in early January that neither one of us would bring up any new ideas to the church for a few months.
And then you just did it the other day.
Yeah, we did not.
And
we
I think we all kind of agreed to it.
Michael has a lot of good ideas. Sometimes we have to, although can we tease something from our meeting on Tuesday?
Sure.
About Michael.
Yeah. Producer Michael.
We do sermon planning.
Yep.
Where I mean, obviously that's your realm,
right.
But we get together as a staff and share ideas and thoughts and things, and you make final decisions, obviously, on all of that. But as we were just kind of, you call it blue sky, where we just say ideas, and Michael had one for a series. What was it? Was it take a hike?
Take a hike.
Take a hike.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, everybody was like, "That's a cool name for a series." And we were people, and so finally, I just asked him, like, "What's Take a Hike about?" He's like, "I don't know. I just really like the name."
I'm like, okay, the point is to take people to the Bible, take people to Jesus, and just a cool name isn't going to take us anywhere.
But if in the future we have a series called Take a Hike, you'll know that Michael eventually figured out what that series is about.
Or we just thought it was a cool idea, and finally
Pastor Mike found something for it.
Okay, how's that going to take us take us back and take us deeper?
It's going to be too fresh now because they've just heard it.
Yeah.
But I think in like 5 years, Pastor Mike, you need to have a series called Take a Hike, but it has nothing to do with, like, for the whole series, people are going to be like, why is this series called Take a Hike? And you never address it. It'll just be just
I was
something
part
funny.
of a church years ago, and our pastor was incredibly creative. He and another person on staff, two of the most creative people I've ever met, and I love them to death. And there were a lot of times when we would have a title, and we'd get through the series, and we'd go, what did that title have to do with the series? And he would say, that's the point. It just created curiosity.
Hey, there you go.
And he's a great Bible teacher and everything. But I'm like, okay.
This has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today.
Speaking of nonsense, we're avoiding the topic. But
when did sermon series titles become a thing? Like, I'm 34. My dad was a pastor, so I attended church fairly regularly. I don't remember being really little and like the sermon title, the sermon series, a sermon graphic was a big deal until, I don't know, I was middle
and some
school-ish.
of it may be awareness, because I think, like you go way back to, John Wesley, and even all the way back to, why am I drawing a blank? Augustine. Augustine. So I'm going way back, and you look, and they would preach in groups and series and work through things. But I think there's an awareness, and especially in the 80s when we began to promote more in what was called the seeker movement, which some people, that triggers different things with them. But we began to promote graphics and series and and those kinds of things, and lean into some more marketing, use marketing tools that maybe we'd never used before.
So,
but I think it's always been around.
So Martin Luther, after he like nailed some stuff to the door of the church, then he like went to his like painter and was like, I need a logo for this new series called the 95 Theses.
Yeah, maybe not, but yeah.
I would like to see what the graphic was for that. All right, well, let's jump in. We're in this new series, Jesus Never Said. I guess it's not that new anymore.
We're
almost halfway through.
We're in week 2 if you're with us in the current time.
Yeah, and if you did miss the weekend teaching, make sure you go check that out on our website or our YouTube channel. You can find it. But this week, you talked about how Jesus never said that some sins are worse than others. So let's talk about sin today, everybody. Welcome to the Grow Podcast.
Yay. Yeah, that's awesome. And where that comes from, we talked about this weekend. There's, everybody thinks, especially who's familiar with Scripture, there's an unforgivable sin.
Yep.
So Christians kind of go that way, and we address that Sunday. But also there's some of us who are like, no, some sins have to be worse than others. And we talked about why we feel that way. And the reality that some things are more damaging than others, but not necessarily worse than others.
Yeah.
And if you want to know my answer, whether some sins are worse than others, listen to the weekend.
Yeah.
Because it probably won't be the answer you want.
Interestingly, 2 weeks in, I think you've given a number of answers that people don't really want.
And
seems like a theme for this series, Pastor Mike.
Scripture has a way of doing that to us.
Yeah,
but
it does.
What I want to do today is actually just help us understand when we use the word sin, what do we really mean?
Yeah.
And that may not interest you, but I want to talk about that for a few minutes, and then you can throw some questions at me about why does this matter, or questions as we go through this. But I'm going to get kind of technical on us for a few minutes, because I looked up, the Bible actually uses in the original manuscript different words, which is fairly common.
I would have guessed that the Bible uses different words.
Yeah. Different words for the word sin. Yeah, there you go. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. It's a good thing I have you here to clarify that. But when you move from one language to another, some languages will have different words for a something, and then another language will just have like one word and it's different nuances.
Right.
And sin is the same way. And so there's Hebrew and Greek, and I'm not going to get all these pronunciations right. I didn't, even though I've taken all those, it's been years since I've actually pronounced them all right.
I'm going to...
You're going to grade me?
No, I'm not, because I'm sure my college Hebrew professor, hi Dean Erickson, is not watching now.
And
but
I don't think mine is either.
Just in case
Ken
he somehow sees this one day, I don't remember any of it. So.
Ken was my Hebrew professor. Mark was my Greek professor. Hopefully neither one of them are watching. But in Hebrew, there is actually multiple words. The most common was the word, I'm going to do my best to pronounce it, ra'ah. And it's used 600 different times in the Old Testament over that time. And basically, when it talks about sin, it means something that's evil or bad, basically something that's contrary to the character of God.
Do you want to clarify why you said why it was only used in the Old Testament for people who might not know?
Okay, that's good. The Old Testament was written primarily in Hebrew. Not all of it. The New Testament, when it was written primarily in Greek.
Yep.
There was some of it that was written arguably in Aramaic first, but so that's where we kind of have that.
Yep.
But a lot of times, most of the time in the Old Testament, when you see the word sin, it's saying something that's contrary to God. That may not even be talking about a decision. It's just something contrary to God. There's another word, and I did happen to look this one up, and I'm going to slaughter it. Cha'ah. It's used. Yeah, I know it. Used about 300 times, and it literally means offense. And this one is intentional. It's knowingly doing something that has, and knowing that it's wrong or deserves punishment. So, and sometimes it's translated in English sin, sometimes transgression, iniquity, some of those things. Okay. But it's like, I intentionally do this and I know it's wrong. And I'm going to push through these because there's a lot of them. There's another one called Rasha, 250 times. It's literally the word wicked. It's something that is morally wrong. everybody knows it. Avon, about 200 times, often translated iniquity or sin. And I like this word because the literal, if we were to take it into the English, it would literally mean crooked or twisted or perverted. So the word picture that it gives is something that was straight or pure that has been taken and twisted and bent or poisoned. And that so describes what sin is. Yeah. It's not just me making a bad choice. It's me taking something that's awesome and perverting it and twisting it. And we need to understand that that's what sin does.
Can I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
For something that's making me chuckle.
Okay.
At one point on the Grow podcast, we were going over the names of God.
Yeah.
And we each talked about our favorite name of God. And it really makes me laugh that you just shared your favorite word for sin in the Old Testament.
I just love the word picture.
I didn't know. Honestly, I thought that was great, but then I couldn't stop laughing in my head at that's Pastor Mike's favorite word for sin.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Yeah. I have a favorite, not a favorite sin. Let me clarify that. Favorite word for sin. Pesha, about 100 times it means transgression. This one means rebellion. It's the choice to go against God's authority. It's not just his character, it's go against his authority. It would be like a child saying, I know you told me not to knock that glass over, but I'm going to do it anyway,
My children would never do that.
Asham, used about 30 times, it's guilty or breaking a relationship, saying, I no longer want to be in a relationship with you. So that's part of what sin is. See, each one of these is describing different aspects of this thing that has messed us up. We tend to think of it as one thing. Sin is something that is totally messed up our universe and us when we talk about it. Ta'ah, used about 50 times, means to go off the path. You ever gone hiking and gone off the path?
Yes.
Into the woods? One of our kids, I won't mention who it is a rule follower. And so when we go hiking,
we all know which one that is if we know your kids.
When we go hiking and we'll get off the path, he's like, but the path, you can't get off the path, you can't. And this word literally, it would be, you've sinned, you've gone off the path, you've broken the rules, you've wandered in the wrong direction. Pesha, used about 41 times, to break away, to cut ties, to cause damage or conflict. Shagah, used about 21 times. And this one is used less in the Old Testament, but there's another word in the New Testament that's used, means very similar more often, which is interesting. It means a mistake. It means an accident. In other words, what I did was wrong, but I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Yeah.
It's, I tripped. I fell. I did something that caused me damage or somebody else damage. So you say, why are those important? But you begin to see that sin it's a choice. It's definitely a choice. But when we read it in Scripture, sometimes when we read it, it's also talking about the consequence, the result, the twisting. And it's not just a choice between right and wrong. It's a choice that takes something and twists it, and it becomes and infects us in our nature. In the Greek, where I just talked about a mistake, in the Greek, in the New Testament, the word that's used more often, and I'm going to anglicize this Greek word, is hamartia. It's used about 174 times as a noun, about 43 times in a little bit different form as a verb in the New Testament. So a lot.
Yeah.
And if you picture aiming at a target, with a bow and arrow or with whatever, and missing it.
Well, I was pretty good at camp at archery, it's hard for me to picture missing the target.
That's what hamartia means. It means to miss the mark.
Sure.
To miss the target. And sin there's a standard.
Right.
Standard, and it's missing it. So it's not even just, I'm going to make a choice to rebel. It's not even living up to the standard. Something has so messed us up that we aren't capable of reaching the standard. Yeah, another word picture of this is trying to jump across the Grand Canyon.
It seems like a bad idea. Did Evel Knievel do that once?
I think he did, and the very narrow part.
Yeah, right.
The very narrow part of Grand Canyon, which I always find ironic. It's like, I jumped the Grand Canyon. Yeah, the narrow part. But if I jump, doesn't matter whether I can jump further than you or not. Neither one of us is going to make it. We're still going to miss the other side. And that's the word picture here is it's not measuring up. Paroptoma, 23 times. Again, it's a mistake, not knowing, it's a lapse. Parabasis, 7 times, to intentionally disregard the law. Asabia, it's used about 6 times. And this describes my nature. So like in Romans 7, where Paul says, I know the stuff that I should be doing, and yet I find myself doing the stuff I shouldn't be doing. It means there's something inside of us that is so twisted that I can't untwist it. And so even though I know what's right, I can't help it. And so it's talking about the ongoing infection of our nature that sin has done to us. Plana, to seduce or to go out of bounds on purpose. So that's like with me going on a hike and saying to my son, we're going to go out of bounds on purpose, and him going, no, you can't go out of bounds, and me trying to convince him. Paraban, not used very many times, but where it's used, it's very obvious. It means I'm going to intentionally violate this. I'm going to intentionally defile, intentionally violate, intentionally break a law.
That's like the one where you say no to your kid and then they stare you in the face as they do it again.
Yeah.
Not my kid. I've heard stories about other people's kids who would do that. Mine, of course, would never do such things.
We had one of our children who did that, and then there was punishment after, and he was receiving the punishment. About halfway through the punishment, he said, "Are you done yet?" And I knew this was going to be a challenge, and that was that intentional. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You done yet? I don't care what the consequence is.
All right. So there's 14 million different words for sin.
There is.
Why does it matter?
Well, I think it matters for a couple of reasons. One is to help us understand that none of us are without it. None of us are without it. And we say, and a little bit like what we talked about last week. But I haven't committed as much sin as someone else. Okay, that may be true, but let's go back to the Grand Canyon analogy. I may be able to jump further than you. I may be better than you, but neither one of us is going to get a jump across without dying. So all of us are infected. All of us are not only something that's happened to us because it's been passed down since Adam and Eve, but it's something we've done. That's that hamartia, and the shagah. We've all missed the mark. Mm-hmm. We haven't measured up to that standard. So that's part of what we need to understand. We also need to understand that sin isn't just something we do. It's because we live in this world, it's become so much of who we are. And so like in this series, when we're talking about Jesus never said that, one of the things that's happened is there's so much of our thinking that's been veiled and shadowed and messed up and twisted and it purified. Sin has done that to us, and we need to realize it's more than just being forgiven for a wrong thing that I've done. There's stuff that's broken or stuff that's wounded that needs to be healed. There's damage that's been done. It's a little bit like, and I don't know if this analogy is great coming out of COVID or not,
no.
But it's a little bit like a virus that we've been exposed to. And if we test, it's like we all have this virus in us. And some of us, it's affected us worse than others, but it's in all of us and is ultimately damaging all of us. Yeah. And that's what sin is. And we talked. If you were with us on Easter weekend, we talked about the difference between punishment and consequence.
Right.
I encourage you to go back and listen to that. Punishment, whoever the authority figure is, can choose the punishment or whether to punish it. But consequence is the result of a choice, and the only way to fix the consequence. Sometimes, the consequence is irreparable. Right? Something is broken.
Right. Yep.
But most broken things can be repaired, but not without a price.
Yep.
And the cross was the price. So there's a consequence to that. And I think for us, sin, the way we choose to try and live, is we try to live our own way. And it's a little bit like trying to live, say, I don't need air. I'm gonna live my own way. I don't need air. And yet that's the one thing I do need. I'm gonna live my own life. I don't need God. and he's who I need the most.
Right.
And I don't even realize it till my lungs start hurting, so I separate myself from the source of life. And we talked about it last week. The reason we know sin is serious, all we have to do is look at the cross. Mm-hmm. If that's the price just to forgive and begin restoration, all sin is serious.
Yeah. Why is it so easy for us to elevate some sins and minimize others, and even you like almost culturally, not our whole culture, but like the church culturally, in my lifetime even, it seemed like we've gone through phases where like no, this is the most important sin right now, and then like 5 years later we're like no, we have a new worst sin now that we're going to focus on.
And some of that, I think there's a couple of reasons. Some of that is culture tends to define what they like and don't like at times, so we'll elevate kind of communally.
Sure.
We like this one, we don't like this one. And it's like we in culture for America, it's okay to abort a baby. Culturally, they would say that, but it's not okay culturally for a living human being to say to them, let's just do away with them. Mm-hmm. That's called murder, and we've decided that as a culture, and yet Scripture's pretty clear on both of those. So I think there's some cultural things that come into play. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing, and we touched on this over the weekend, some choices have greater obvious damage consequences.
Sure. Yeah.
I can have, let's use the one that Jesus referred to in the Sermon on the Mount. I could engage in the act of adultery, or I can have lustful thoughts. Both of them are damaging to me. One has far more devastating relational consequences. Some of it because of culture, but some of it just because there's a violation, and a physical violation, and an emotional violation. Both of them break us and are sinful, but some just have greater things. Addiction. I can be addicted to a drug. There are physical consequences that come with that, that will have to be dealt with. And so we say, that's worse than being addicted to popcorn.
Right.
Addiction, anything that we go to for our satisfaction instead of Jesus, ultimately will mess us up. But some have more obvious damaging consequences, and so that's why we elevate some others.
Yeah, I remember, and my dad's probably listening, so forgive me if I slaughter exactly what this was about. But I remember my dad talking about that same thing in his life, where his addiction was like chocolate chip cookies, or just sweets, cookies, whatever it was, and he was just like, I've had this for decades. And it's just fine. Yeah. Like I've been able to just be addicted to that, and no one's ever, confronted Pastor Tom about his chocolate chip cookie addiction. But like you were saying, it doesn't mean it's not damaging. It doesn't mean there aren't consequences to it. But yeah, that's okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah, and I think let's just be honest. Some things are more fun. Some sin is more fun.
Sure.
Yeah. I've heard different people say it. I'll give Craig Rochelle credit for it because he's who I heard say it the most recently. There's some sin that's fun, and if you don't think it's fun, you're doing it wrong. Because it is. And the Bible's honest about it. The Bible calls it fleeting pleasure. It feels good. And so because it gives some temporary satisfaction, we lessen in our minds and emotionally its consequences. And because some things are more devastating, we elevate them as, or however you want to do that, as being somehow worse than others.
Let's talk briefly about dealing with the consequence of sin, all sin, being equal in God's eyes, and then wrap things up. So we went a little long last week,
time, so we won't go quite as long. And here's and this is where Easter, which is a few weeks ago, if you're listening to this in timeline, matters. Both the cross and the empty tomb. Way to throw that pen on the floor there for those of you who are watching.
Drop than a throw.
The cross, Jesus paid the sin price, the sin debt for us. And what did he say? His first words on the cross, Father, forgive them. It's about paying the price for sins so that we can be forgiven. So much more than that.
Yeah,
I'm going to oversimplify it. The empty tomb was about conquering the consequences of sin. And the Bible goes on to say the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is now available to work and heal in your spirit. So there's two things to deal with the consequences of sin. And we actually talked about it a little bit on Easter. Forgiveness. We need to be forgiven of our sin, have the price paid for us. And then there's the process of healing, because it's a little bit like, we talked about something being twisted. Something has been twisted because there's a pressure on it. Forgiveness is releasing the pressure, but the twist is still there. So now it needs to be untwisted. And so healing needs to happen. It needs to happen by inviting the Holy Spirit into your life and point out the stuff that you don't even know is twisted. Baptism is symbolic of this as part of the obedience process of cleansing and saying, he's making me new. He's both made me new and making me new. Both are happening at the same time. Learning to live the way that we were meant to live, and then putting pieces back together, broken stuff. Learning to live in community, learning what worship means. And some of that brokenness is caused such twistedness. I need some people with some skill or some wisdom beyond me. Could be a counselor that I need at some level of brokenness, or something that someone else has done to me. Healing has to happen, and there's a process. So it's forgiveness and then ongoing healing. So and that's so much of what we talk about. We don't use those terms on the Grow podcast stuff. That's why God always has a next step, because ultimately the next step for you is restoration. Yeah. And there's always a next step of restoration until, he says, and this is ultimately what the book of Revelation is talking about, not just going to heaven, about the restoration of all things, including us. Yeah. We get new bodies, and there's that whole thing that's new. Yeah. And that's the great declaration of when Jesus comes back. Behold, all things are new.
This is what episode is this? 44.
Yes.
Anytime that topic of being completely restored and the joy, I just love watching your face when you start talking about that, because you just have so much joy, looking forward to that moment. And then
I think that's something we miss. Yeah. I think so much of Christianity has been, I'll just bide my time, I'll get to heaven, and then I'm going to sit on a cloud. And no, it's about restoration, here now, and even more so then, the restoration of all things.
Awesome. Well, Jesus never said some sins are worse than others. Right. And we'll move on next Sunday, if you're joining us the week this came out, to something else that Jesus never said. So thank you, Pastor Mike. But do you have some homework for us? I assume our homework is pick our favorite word for sin. Yeah, it's either that or it's find Pastor Mike's Greek and Hebrew professors from college and get this video to them to judge how he said all the words.
I think just, and it's not simple, but I'm going to make it sound simple. Spend some time asking the Lord, what's one area of mine in my life that you want to work on healing, restoring right now? Because there's always something. Yeah. And just invite him to point that out.
Yeah. All right. You kind of touched on it, but our thing we always say here on the Grow podcast, growth always starts with the next step. So that's why we always talk about next steps. And so let's make sure we all do that this week. Pastor Mike, thank you. Really cool episode today. I like talking with you. I always love talking with you on here. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet, whether you join us on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so you get notified when the new you got to turn notifications on as well. Yes. I don't regularly talk about that, but to some of you who might not be regularly on YouTube or podcast apps or whatever, you have to go into the settings and turn notifications on if you want those notifications. Yeah. So make sure you go in and turn those on as well. But our new episodes always go up on Mondays at 6 a.m. Pastor Mike wakes up at 6 a.m. on Monday mornings so he can be the first person to listen to the podcast.
No, I don't.
No, I hope.
Yeah.
We love it. We love all of you. I hope none of you do that. It's available at like 8 a.m. if you want to sleep in a little bit more. But thank you for being here with us. We always appreciate this time we get to spend together on the Grow Podcast, and we'll see you next time.